Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order at 6:05. With great respect and humility, we acknowledge and honor the lands of the Nanaimo people. The Nanaimo people maintain their profound, unique, and spiritual connection to the land through ageless traditions, teachings, stewardship, and expressions of reciprocity. Also acknowledging that we serve on the traditional territories of Snanawas and Staminas First Nations. We have no transfer of items to the open meeting agenda. No additions or deletions, but I do have a change in order. We're going to move item 15.2 to follow item number 9 on our agenda this evening, as we have Dr. Sandra Allison here, our local medical health officer, joining us this evening. So with that change, is there any objection to approving the agenda? Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved. Section 7, approval of the minutes. That the minutes from the special board meeting held on February 17th, 2021 and the regular board meeting held on February 24th, 2021 be adopted. Is there a mover? Moved by Trustee Higginson and a second by Trustee Wilkinson. Is there any objection? The motion carries unanimously with no objections. Thank you. Moving into section 8, section 72.3 report, that the section 72.3 report from the closed board meeting held on February 24th, 2021 be received. Is there a mover? Moved by Trustee Burzovich and a second. Seconded by Trustee Stanley. Any objection? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Announcements and reminders. So are we going before 9 or after? Follow item 9. Just double checking my own notes. Education committee meeting will be held April 7th after our return from spring break. A business committee meeting will be held April 14th, and the Board of Education meeting for April will be April 28th. Also a reminder that when we return from spring break, statutory holiday is Good Friday on April 2nd, 2021, and Easter Monday, April 5th, 2021, schools will be closed. So moving into 15.2, I just want to acknowledge that we have invited Dr. Allison if there are any questions related to 15.2, which is Trustee Burzovich notice of motion for masks, and Trustee Allison is here to offer us any medical expertise should we need it. So Trustee Burzovich, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I have two motions here, and the first one reads that the Board of Education for School District 68 require masks for grade 6 and 7 students in all indoor areas, including when they're in learning groups, with exemptions for students who cannot wear masks for health and behavioral reasons, effective upon the return from spring break. And I'll speak to it if I have a seconder.
So the motion has been moved by Trustee Burzovich. Trustee Burzovich, are we able to get that motion in the chat so the board can see it?
Yes, I can do that. And actually, maybe I'll do that for the second one as well so that I can read it more easily. Hold on, sorry. Control V, come on. Sorry, I couldn't get my cursor in the correct spot.
Thank you. And I see that it's a little bit tricky. There's multiple seconds there. I believe that I saw Trustee Barron second the motion. Trustee Burzovich, you can open.
Thank you. Well, as we know, we are heading into spring break, and at spring break, we don't have the same levels of controls in terms of our student behavior. We don't know what families are going to be doing. There's concerns that people may not be following provincial health guidelines and may put themselves at greater risks, and then which means when they return to school, we will then have greater risks of having COVID in our schools. We do have masks in grade 6 and 7s in middle schools, although we don't have middle schools. There's nothing there's nothing scientific that's been put forward to me to explain why grade 6s and 7s in an elementary school would be different from those students in a middle school. And I just believe that, given concerns that have been voiced from parents and just our general community fear, well, community concerns around COVID, and given that masks have been mentioned as one of the means of protecting against COVID, that there is validity in us bringing forward this motion at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there speakers to the motion? Trustee Stanley?
So allow me a process question first, please, Chair.
Yes.
Just because I'm a bit confused. So we're debating motions at this moment in time, and Dr. Allison is here to answer questions during debate.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can allow the questions to come forward in the same manner that we would if you were to ask staff a question within a motion for information.
Okay. I wanted to clarify that first. Can you put me back on the list so I can gather my thoughts now that I've got that information?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Trustee Barron?
Thank you, Chair. And hi, big hello to Dr. Allison. Nice to see you here. Thank you for bringing forward this motion, Trustee Burzovich. One thing I'm struggling with a little bit is that I agree 100% with the intentions of the motion. I did have a potential amendment to the motion that I felt still remained with the initial intention, but clarified some of the details for me. And I'm wondering if now would be an appropriate time to bring forward the motion, or if you would prefer the amendment to the motion, apologies, or if you'd prefer for me to wait.
You should put forward your amendment when you're prepared to. If now's the moment, then go ahead.
Sure.
I just ask that it be included in the chat, please.
I've prepared the amendment to the motion in the chat. Did you want to allow a moment for others to read it, or do you want me to read it out loud?
I'd like you to read it out loud, and then we'll see if it's seconded.
Thank you. That the Board of Education for School District 68 require all students in grades 6 and 7 to wear face masks in schools, both within and outside their learning groups, in a manner consistent with the most recent health and safety guidelines for middle and secondary schools outlined by the Ministry of Education.
Okay, the amendment has been seconded by Trustee Stanley. Trustee Barron, you can speak to the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Speaking with our original mover of the motion, Trustee Burzovich, and talking a little bit more thoroughly about the intentions of the motion, we together came up with a slight amendment, which we felt more adequately spoke to the intentions. And a couple of changes in here are actually the first intention is to look at having all grade 6s and 7s wearing masks. That's the intention of this motion. The specific changes in here is it takes out the section around the exceptions that is within the safety guidelines, health and safety guidelines that are already in place. And so those exceptions would already be embedded within there. So, you know, there are many circumstances where exceptions may be appropriate, and by explicitly stating those two possible exceptions, I felt that it was too specific, and so wanted to open up the motion to have it specifically ask for grades 6 to 7 to wear face masks in schools, and aligning it with what we're seeing for safety guidelines for middle and secondary schools. Yeah, maybe I'm not explaining it properly. Maybe I can open it up for from there. But just basically some changes with the intention of all grade 6s and 7 wearing face masks, and clarifying that the intention is to have it align with secondary and middle school students as far as the process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question on the amendment from Trustee Higginson.
You know what, I'll wait until, did the amendment get, is the Trustee Stanley seconding the amendment there?
Mhm.
Okay, thanks. I'm just going to speak against the amendment because it says in a manner consistent with the health and safety guidelines, and yet the motion is inconsistent with the health and safety guidelines. So it doesn't make sense to me. So I speak against the amendment.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other speakers to the amendment? So, oh, Trustee Stanley?
So I'm in favor of the amendment and I'm in favor of the original motion. I actually don't see them that different. I think the intention of this here is the same as the previous. It's just an attempt to be cleaner wording. And so maybe people will disagree about the wording on that. But I think that this motion is not inconsistent with the guidelines. It is consistent with the guidelines, yet over and above. So it's not contrary to. And if anything, what it does is it takes the guidelines, which specify, grade or schools and grades within those schools, but yet also at the same time, we recognize that there's not consistency across the province about whether or not we have middle schools or not. So what we have is an unusual situation.
Trustee Stanley, I'm just going to ask you to speak specifically to the amendment. I feel as if you're speaking to the motion as a whole.
I'm speaking to the comment that it was inconsistent, the previous comment. So the previous comment, what I think would that comment would your comment would apply to the previous comment, would it not?
Okay, go ahead. Just specific to the changes.
As a point of order, I was speaking against the amendment. I spoke against the amendment and I gave my reason for speaking against the amendment, not the main motion.
Trustee Stanley,
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, so I guess that I'm going to stand by my comment that it's not, perhaps we're having some confusion about the word consistent. And this is to reference all the other aspects of the guidelines, safety plan, that talk about exemptions and the various details in that. So to be consistent with the way that it's referenced in there. So that is the intent, or this word here. I do not believe that this amendment nor the previous, because they're the same, are inconsistent, as has been suggested, with the guidelines. And I was going to try to justify that, but I guess what I will do, I will say that once we get through this amendment or not, the comments apply to both, in the sense that they're still dealing with the same ages. So I guess that's what I'll say to that. I find it challenging that we're debating about us, one word.
Thank you. Need to check my notes. One moment. Trustee Burzovich, you may speak to the amendment.
Yes, I'm just going to speak in favor of the amendment. I actually want to thank Trustee Barron for her work with this amendment, because it does more clearly articulate what my intentions were with the original motion, and I actually think it's a lot clearer and cleaner for my purposes, so I support the amendment.
Thank you. Trustee Keller speaking to the amendment.
Yes, thank you. So I will be speaking in favor of the amendment, and it's because the intent of the amendment is to ensure that the exclusions are consistent with the guidelines. So that is why I speak to the amendment, in favor of the amendment.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Okay. This will be me taking my time this evening. All right, so I see a call the question on the amendment. Is there any opposition to calling the question? Seeing none, is there opposition to the amendment? Please state your opposition in the chat bar. Okay, so on the amendment, I have trustees Higginson, McKay, and Wilkinson opposed. As well as trustee Robinson. Okay, so the amendment carries. Back to the main motion as amended. We have a speakers list. Trustee Keller.
Thank you, Chair. So back to the main motion. I'd like to thank Dr. Allison for her time this evening, and just note that we all appreciate your time and effort. And with respect to the motion, Chair, I'd like to speak in favor of the motion. And the reason being is we have, my position is that we have an understanding that we can go above and beyond the minimum requirements that are set out by the public health officer and provide additional layers of protection to enhance the safety of our students. Further, that the grade 5s and 6s, if they were to be, or sorry, 6s and 7s, if they were to be attending middle school, are already required to wear masks in our schools. And just because we haven't adopted a middle school approach shouldn't mean that we don't extend those same level of protections to our students in our system. We have a community who many parents that I've heard from wish to see their students wearing masks in those grades. And further, I think it's important for us to provide as much protection and take the most conservative approach and risk-averse approach that we can. And this is a small step that I feel we can take in support of providing students with this protection. So I think, again, just in favor of the motion, that it's important for us as a board to consider what our community is asking of us in providing support to our families, and hopefully, as the board's aware, there are, a number of students across the district who have chosen the distance ed or Connect Ed, Island Connect Ed option this year. I don't know how many were in grade 6 and 7s, but any little bit that we can do to encourage and make families more comfortable for sending their kids back to their bricks and mortar school is another hope of mine as well. So at this point, I would speak in favor of the motion, and if I could please be added back to the list because I do have a question for staff.
Thank you, Trustee Keller. Trustee Stanley, you were the next person on the speakers list in the motion.
Thank you. So I guess I want to speak in favor of the motion in the sense that I appreciate Trustee. So first, let me say thank you to the people that brought forward the motion because we have, you know, a community that is, well, we're all going through COVID. We're all stressed. We're all concerned. We may differ in our opinions on that, but I do think that our community, you know, many people have been asking this question and asking us to address this concern. So I do believe that us discussing this issue, exploring it, you know, is important as public representatives to show the community that, you know, we've heard their concerns and that we're publicly debating the merits of this. And I think I thank all my colleagues for this opportunity, because I do think that that is an important function, you know, of the role that we serve. So thank you to the movers. I agree with Trustee Keller's comments of that we, you know, can't, you know, we are following the safety plan. We are choosing, or at least this motion is asking to go, be consistent yet go above that safety plan. And why I'm comfortable with that is that, you know, as someone who's worked as a clinical psychologist, I know no developmental differentiation and no behavioral justification that students in grades 6 and 7 in elementary schools would be any different than grades 6 and 7 in middle schools. Their norms, their development, their capacity to wear masks because of their age are the same. And I believe the concern about younger kids wearing masks was in the behavioral realm about whether they could comply with mask wearing in a safe way. So from my read on the provincial health order, it's been deemed that kids in middle school, which includes grades 6 and 7, have the developmental capacity to adequately comply with mask wearing. So, and, you know, to whatever extent COVID risk is related to age, you know, all of our grade 6 and 7 students are, you know, developmentally are the same, regardless of whether they're in elementary or they're in middle school. So in my perspective, that to me is a matter of being consistent with the science that indicates why this age, or supports why this age should be wearing masks and that they're capable of wearing masks. And that the debate about whether or not we do this in elementary schools is more of an organizational debate. And so from that perspective, I believe that organizationally we can manage this. I believe the people that be primarily responsible for compliance are, you know, classroom teachers who have, you know, been predominantly asking for this. So I see from my perspective that there's reasons to support this motion, and that some of the concerns I'm not concerned about for the reasons that I've explained. I do think that, you know, it's important for us to consider the safety and well-being of students and staff. And from my perspective, you know, taking this little step of asking our students in grades 6 and 7 to wear masks in schools in the manner that's been suggested is just as, you know, a way to increase that added layer. So it's one layer. I know other layers might be better, but this is just one thing that we can do in addition. And I welcome that. I welcome, you know, if we can, you know, if this is going to help us protect one kid, then, you know, frankly, I don't see a justification for not. So that's why I'm in support of the motion.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Stanley. Trustee O'Neill?
Thank you. And so, you know, I do have a position on this, and but I also don't want to ignore the fact that we've got a doctor in the house. So hello, Dr. Allison. And so through the chair, can I indulge a question? And I will trust that either yourself, Chair, or the doctor will inform that, you know, it may not be medical in nature. So I'll do my best. But so I'm wondering about this. I'm wondering what the advice would be around the comparators of what we see happening in middle schools, so 6, 7, versus what's happening in our schools, because there's been an acknowledgement that we don't actually have that environment here. In your medical opinion, and being, I'm sure, quite well versed in what the guidelines are, what would be some of the challenges, or would there be any challenges with enforcing something like this?
Thank you, Trustee O'Neill. Chair, thank you so much for inviting me. And challenges in enforcing. Well, first off, I don't really, at the start of this, I heard words like compliance and enforcement. And to me, I think it's really important that we take a step back from what you're asking here. And the role that you play as trustees is incredibly important in listening to your community, and also listening to experts like myself, and then listening to the Ministry of Education, and balancing all of those perspectives and coming up with the best decision for your community. So mask use, as you mentioned, is really only one of the hierarchy of controls when we're trying to address the burden of coronavirus in our schools, because that's what we're talking about here right now, is the burden of coronavirus in our schools. And I appreciate the trustees' intention, and I heard language like the most risk-averse approach possible. And I really want to caution folks, because while you're responsible for the health and safety regarding coronavirus, you're also responsible for the mental wellness of the children in your schools. And if you were to implement this process where, and I'm just trying to understand, because I'm really new here, just keeping in mind, I just got here and I'm just learning your school district, that for 2 grades out of 7 in a school, you would determine that they needed to be treated differently. I believe that that would change some of how they feel about themselves and how they feel about the community and the school. But I don't know, I trust that you've all done this really careful look into what the negative consequences might be of this. So I trust the BC Centre for Disease Control and the very careful eye that they've had on school cases. And I can tell you that since November, I've worked up many cases in schools, and the contacts that have been monitored as high-risk contacts. And high-risk contacts are excluded when they're exposed, potentially because they're not masked. But we've defined this approach in the school to ensure that we are protecting the safety of the children with the least restrictive means possible. And the reason why we use that as an ethical principle is not to impose additional burden on people, but to allow them to be unimpeded as much as possible with the most protection possible. So I appreciate that there are opportunities to add a ton of layers in here. I can name 10 more things you could do, but I wouldn't want you to do them, because I believe that the BC Centre for Disease Control, as they've reviewed the evidence and given us new guidelines just a month and a week ago, that gave us better guidance for the older students. And I believe that you do have some curiosities around 6 and 7, and I do believe the idea about treating students in the school the same way is a very important and valid reason for you to consider, if you were to do something different to 2 grades in that school, how they would feel in that school. So there's that. And I believe that if you took what might be a whole of school approach, the idea that you treat everybody the same in that school, it doesn't increase risk for other students. I have not seen that as an important element of my workups where I feel that I need to do something drastically different. If I did, I would, and I have in the past. I believe that these guidance have been adapted in the last version to really adopt all of the experience that's happened in the Lower Mainland, of which we cannot benefit from, because I have not seen the volume of schools that they have in Fraser and Vancouver Coastal Health. So my advice would be to follow the guidance that just came out in February 4th. The idea about additional controls yeah, I appreciate that that's a concern for parents and asking for those additional controls. But I would ask parents too to ensure that during spring break, they were doing the additional controls at home. Because what you've said to me is that you want to impose additional things in the school because you think that possibly parents may not be following guidance over the holidays. So my inclination would be not to punish or impose additional measures on students. And will that be hard to manage? Maybe, maybe not. You might actually find that some students around that age, when you compel them to do something, they become more, difficult with it. They become more oppositional, and that can lead to more conflict in the classroom. So I appreciate that this is a gray area for many when we don't have these schools with those middle schools. But I believe that should you take on these additional measures and add these extra layers, even just this one layer, but what's to stop you from adding more layers, right? My inclination would be to decrease it to the least amount of controls to achieve the outcome you want to get. That is really a public health principle. Least restrictive means trying to ensure that you get the outcomes you want. And what are the outcomes? Decreased transmission in your schools. When I see a case in your school, I'm responding to it, isolating contacts. Certainly in some schools, we have isolated whole cohorts, and that is an impact on families. But I believe we're refining our approach, and we are finding that we are not isolating whole groups of students, but students that are seated near in proximity and in close contact. And that's been really successful. I've not seen secondary transmission. So, and those are in all grades, right, from kindergarten up to high school. So I appreciate that you're struggling and grappling with this. My professional opinion is that we have guidance and evidence from the ministry and BC Centre for Disease Control. They do recommend strengthening the approach to masks and recommending masks, not requiring them for the senior students. And I would really try and stay away from required language in anything that you promote. And that's not the language that's used in the guidelines that are recommended. So thank you for inviting me. I don't have solid data for you today. I did not have a presentation prepared for all the exposures. I have anecdotal information and also just my experience having done this. So thank you for posing the question and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Ellison. Trustee O'Neill, do you have a follow-up question?
No, just to say thank you, and I've put myself back on the list to speak to the motion, so I don't think it would be appropriate now, but thank you very much for clarifying.
Thank you. Trustee Wilkinson is the next speaker.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Ellison, for being here. I appreciate all that information. So I'm going to speak in opposition to the motion. I've heard what Dr. Ellison has said, and I've got so many pieces on here. I absolutely want to be in support of our staff and our students in the schools, and I think that a motion like this just creates more stress and ambiguity in what's happening. I think sometimes we do things that make it a little clearer, and the fact that we have elementary schools and high schools, that separates it out and it makes it a lot easier in that respect. And I think that the logistics of it it would just be so hard to implement anyway. And I don't think that, what Dr. Ellison is saying, that the science supports that. And I think we're in debate. I don't think we're in agreement in what the above and beyond part is, right? I think that's the difference, where I wouldn't see that we're not going above and beyond. I think we are going above and beyond by making sure that we're supporting the most logistic way of doing things in the middle of so much stress and chaos and in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm not in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ellison, for your words. They really resonated with me. And so I speak in opposition to the motion because, to Dr. Allison's advice, boards of education have never created public health policy. We have always relied on working closely with our medical health officer and our health authorities. And on that line, the Provincial Health Office has created guidelines for us. And our job is the education side of these guidelines and to implement the public health side in our schools, not to create the public health side of those guidelines. And I think about examples of this in the past. I think about where it intersects with schools is something like a few years ago when the measles happened and there was an uptick in measles and we were under public pressure to exclude kids who hadn't been vaccinated. And we relied on our medical officers to support us through that process. I also think, and I'm not trying to belittle the experience of COVID and the impacts that it has, but I also think about head lice and how about every few years we face tremendous public pressure to change the way the school district handles lice in head lice in schools by excluding kids until it can be proven that they are lice free. And we don't do that either because we rely on the advice of our health authority. And I also want to remind folks that the steering committee as well came up with helps with these guidelines at the provincial level where I sit. And the issue of the grade 6s and 7s versus, so a grade-based approach versus a school-based approach was talked about. And I remind my colleagues that in June, when we reopened, there was a grade-based approach. And that created a lot of confusion and a lot of difficulty for the consistent implementation of guidelines. And one of the best things that we can do if we are concerned about safety is consistent implementation. And so upon the advice and request of staff, after the experience of June, the steering committee moved the stages document to a school-based approach because it was extremely confusing to implement a grade-based approach. And on that same note, this discussion was again had at the updated guidelines about whether there should be a change. And to Dr. Allison's point, when you're talking about restrictions, which is a new term I learned sitting on the steering committee at the advice of the experts there who are experts in population medicine, the idea of restrictions needs to weigh against the benefit that you will get from it. And the implementation and enforcement of having this be different in schools does not pass the test of the benefit that we would get out of it. And the steering committee heard very clearly at that level from almost all parties there that the implementation of this by a grade approach was very difficult in the schools. And I think about in our own school district where we have multiple split grades and what that would look like. I also think about if we are, to Dr. Allison's point, and to, you know, we're talking about the, we're talking about wanting to make sure that we are making people feel safe within the current guidelines. That's what I want to focus on. I want to focus on consistent implementation of the current guidelines because we know that they work. And I don't want to take our staff time away from consistent implementation of the guidelines. They are tired, they are exhausted, and I don't want to ask more of them unless it is something that we know is going to have the benefit of the time that's going to be associated with it. And what I've heard from our local medical officer, who's very well versed in our own context, as well as from the provincial health officers who sit on the steering committee, that this will not have the benefit that people are hoping for. So it doesn't, I speak against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Robinson?
I too speak against the motion. If I want to learn more about health and safety of our students, I turn to someone in the medical profession. Doesn't that make sense? And I understand with all the fears that have been going along with COVID that a number of people decide wearing a mask is better. I do understand that. I can understand why they come to that conclusion, but I'll still turn to the medical people. And there's a big difference, by the way, in my mind, between grade 6, 7 students in middle school and grade 6, 7 students in elementary school. In middle school, they're not impacting kindergarten to grade 5 students. If they're in elementary school, very much they will be impacting those students. So thanks, Dr. Allison, for being here. And it just makes sense that we follow your guidance and the guidance of other experts across the province, across the country, and around the world for that matter. By the way, Chair, I have not had one teacher or one principal ask me if grade 6, 7 students should be wearing masks. So it's just not been an issue with me. That's it for me.
Thank you. So I'm next on the list. I have a question for staff. Superintendent Saywell. Thank you. So I've heard about, I've heard the medical health officer's opinion from a medical perspective, which I very much appreciate. I would like to ask you to share with me whether or not this is, from an organizational perspective, applying it practicably. What is your opinion on that matter? We heard about it from the medical perspective, but I'd like to hear it from an organizational capacity perspective from yourself.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. Thanks to Dr. Allison for all her great work in the district, and of course for being here this evening and providing trustees with her advice. I agree with Dr. Allison completely that treating students in the same way in a whole school approach, I think is really important. I can't predict what effect mandating masks for 2 out of the 7 grades in an elementary school, what would happen there. But I can tell you this, we have quite a few split grades. And I start to imagine how that would work in a 5-6 split. You would have students literally days older in one grade than another student in grade 5 who was, born in December, and the grade 6 student born in December, the grade 5 student born in January, literally days apart. And we also have some students in grade 5 that would be older than students in grade 6. And so I think it would make some kind of awkward circumstances. I think one of the biggest problems I have is that we would be requiring parents to make a really difficult decision. Do they follow district direction, or do they follow the direction of the provincial health officer, the Ministry of Education, and our own local medical health officer? I think we're putting them in a very difficult position. I'll also add that we've had 4 exposures in grades 6 and 7, and we haven't had any transmissions yet. So again, as Dr. Allison mentioned, we just updated the mask mandate for the students who the provincial health office decided where it was needed after looking at all the evidence. And we just moved into this, the new guidelines. So I think they fit, and I think we're doing a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent. Trustee Barron is the next speaker.
Thank you, through the chair. So I guess I just want to take a breath for a moment and acknowledge the challenges in this discussion. In particular, when my opinion varies from what we have heard so far. It's challenging because I want to reiterate how much I respect the opinion and advice that's being brought forward by Dr. Allison, and respect the opinions that differ from mine that are coming forward. But I do disagree and would like to speak to that a little bit. You know, if I could speak frankly, I would, as an individual trustee, prefer that we have masks being worn by all students in our school district. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but I'm just going to put that out there. That would be my preference. I think this motion is a step in the right direction, in my opinion. We do see grade 6s and grade 7s, as we've already talked about in other BC districts, that are wearing masks depending on the school composition. This is not a big stretch for us to ask that grade 6s and 7s in our district are also wearing masks. There are some operational pieces, of course, but I do not believe that they are unsurmountable. I have had conversations with staff in elementary level, just to speak to a comment that was made earlier, who did say that they felt there would be benefit to grade 6s and 7s wearing masks, which is why I'm in favor of this motion. I'm not coming forward being in favor of this motion based on a personal opinion. I'm coming forward in favor of this motion based on what I'm hearing from the community and within our schools. And now I'm aware that we could be hearing different things, and I respect that. But I also want to bring forward what it is that I'm hearing and acknowledge that in this process. You know, I am hearing the argument around lower grades, around some safety issues being in place around the younger grades, say K to 5, wearing masks. When we're talking about grade 6s and grade 7s, this isn't the same safety issues that were brought forward to us around the K to 5 aren't the same. We're talking about different developmental ages. I understand that there are ages that would be closely aligned, but there does need to be a grade where we just say, okay, these are the grades and let's move forward with that. I think this is a small piece of the overall safety measures that are in place as we walk through this pandemic together. And I think it's an important one for us to reiterate. As a trustee, I feel it's our responsibility to ensure that we're following the health and safety guidelines that are put forward. I completely agree with that. I also believe that if we can increase safety at the local level by a small piece of asking our grade 6s and grade 7s to wear masks, I think this is our responsibility to do so. And because of those reasons, I'm very much in support of this motion. And I do hope that we keep this in perspective, that this isn't a big stretch from what we're currently doing and also aligns with what many districts are doing. The only difference is that we don't have middle schools, and the operational issues around that I get, but I don't feel, I do feel that the benefits of this outweigh the negatives. And so thanks for allowing me to speak. And again, Dr. Allison, thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you. Trustee Keller, you're next on the list.
Thank you, Chair McKay. So I have a question through the chair, probably to Superintendent Saywell. I'm looking or hoping that the superintendent could help me understand a little bit more about how we might, if the board approved this motion, operationalize it across the district.
Sorry, through you, Chair. Is this a trick question? We would mandate mask wearing at grade 6, 7. How would we operationalize it?
If I may, Chair, just no, sorry, Scott. I'm not in any way trying to give you a trick question.
Okay.
I just want to understand some of the intricacies to help me decide sort of at the end, you know, what we're considering here. So should the board pass this motion, would we, for example, need to update our COVID safety plan and submit it to the ministry? You know, what would that look like? How would we put it into practice in our classrooms?
No, thank you through the chair. Thanks for the clarification. There might be a function. I don't know, Trustee Keller, what would be required. Our plans do get approved by the Ministry of Education. I might assume that we would have to resubmit because we've altered the plans. And again, I believe we're going against the provincial guidelines because the guidelines say at elementary schools, you're not required to wear masks. So I'm not sure how that would play. And then I do believe there is a challenge for parents. I'll say it again, because they have to make a decision whether to send their student in grade 6 or 7 to school when the provincial health office says they don't need to. As well, there are those operational challenges around split grades that I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Trustee Keller, do you have a follow-up question?
Not at this time, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee O'Neill is the next speaker.
Thank you, Chair. Undoubtedly a divided issue. I stand opposed to the motion. And I may as well voice sort of at the onset here, because I feel this is part of the debate, that I also believe that by doing this, we would be going against the public health guidelines. But I want to walk through a little bit of my thought process here. And I want to talk a little bit about equity. And again, I want to speak to a point I hadn't considered that was brought up through the doctor here around what that may look like for a student sitting in a classroom or in a school and having to wear a mask versus other students. Because in the same vein, I've thought about what are we asking of our families in the district right now? What are we asking of our students in the district right now as it relates to equity? I think that there is economic implications to a motion of this nature at this juncture, this close to schools close, if you will. So these are some of the things that I've been contemplating, which I haven't heard so much discussed at this table. But for me, that's very much at the forefront of a lot of my decision making, and I have a tough time envisioning how we balance what the benefits of passing such a motion would be compared to what some of the perhaps unintended consequences of that motion may well be. So for those reasons, I'm not in support of this motion, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Trustee Higginson?
Thank you. I do feel it incumbent upon me to address some issues that have been brought up around hearing from our communities. People know we take this very seriously in this position, and I reviewed our correspondence, and we did get 2 letters this week, and I will say that that's because I heard from folks and I told them to write to the board, because that's our process. So that's who I'm hearing from. And I'm hearing from my trustees, my colleagues, that they're hearing things. And we're very clear with our staff that when we make decisions, we want data, we want evidence, we want to be able to have good information to make them. And because people are hearing things, I struggle with that. And so in preparation for this, I did review our correspondence, and it's been quite a while. I also think in terms of, the balance of the health measure that we're talking about, the implication of the grade 6s and 7s being singled out in their school. We have 2,200-ish staff, 15,000-ish students who are in our system every single day. We have had, I believe, less than 5 in-school transmission events. So the implications of having our grade 6s and 7s and the impact on families, to Trustee O'Neill's point. So I have a child who's in grade 3 and I have a child who's in grade 6, and they have 2 different sets of rules. The benefit, the proposed benefit, does not outweigh to me the implications of this. And I also really want to challenge this narrative that we need to go above and beyond, because what we are doing in BC and what we are doing in Nanaimo Ladysmith is what we should be talking about. We have had our kids in school full-time, uninterrupted, every single day. We haven't changed our schedule. The impact that that has on our communities to be able to rely on that consistency is a big deal. And so when we start comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions, we should look at the whole picture, because a lot of other jurisdictions have interrupted schools, they've changed breaks, they've had kids on remote learning, and they have not done as well as us. And in fact, many jurisdictions in the world haven't done as well as us. And so when we start talking about those other layers are methods of exclusion. And when we have had kids in school every single day, and when we have 17,000 people who interact with our school system every day, and we've had less than 5 in-school transmissions, that's the conversation we should be having. That's the one we need to be having.
Thank you. Trustee Keller is next. I just want to acknowledge that you'll request that you speak to the motion, Trustee Keller, as you've already spoken to the motion once and asked a question of staff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll do my best. So I'll just start by saying that I appreciate the diversity of opinions that have been shared this evening. I appreciate hearing from each and every one of you, especially our guest this evening and our staff. And I just want to share one piece related to the motion, that I just a different perspective on the equity piece that was brought up by one of my trustee colleagues, is that I'm concerned about equity as well, from a little bit different perspective. And this comes from the perspective of families who would like to send their students to school wearing masks, but aren't necessarily comfortable doing so because it singles them out, because their colleagues in their grade are not required to wear masks. So I think it's important to consider all aspects when we're talking about equity as well. It's not an easy, I totally can see this from both sides, and I just think it's important for us to also recognize that there are some students in our system whose families would probably prefer them to wear masks in schools, but because their friends in their classrooms are not, they're less likely to be inclined to do so. So I think there is a little bit of stigma that we're working against as well. So I just want to bring that to the attention as a little bit different perspective.
Thank you, Trustee Keller. Trustee Brzovic, I'll invite you to close debate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trustee Keller actually said most of what I was going to say to close debate. I will just say I appreciate the respectful discourse. I think that this was an important conversation for us to have. I still believe that we would be, there is value in this motion, and I would hope that we would consider it. I don't know what else to say. It's all been said.
Thank you, Trustee Brzovic. So I'll call the question on the motion. If there's anyone opposed to the motion, please make the notation in the chat so that I can record it. Trustee Brzovic, please mute your mic.
Oh, sorry.
So the question's been called. The vote is opposed. Trustees are Trustee Wilkinson, Trustee Higginson, Trustee McKay, Trustee O'Neill, and Trustee Robinson. Therefore, the motion fails. Thank you, Dr. Ellison, for being here with us this evening. I just would like to review something. One moment. I think we can let you go for our next motion that we're going to be discussing, allow you to go back to your evening. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. please, you know, again, I want to extend my gratitude and thanks to you for the work that you do in our community and most certainly with our schools. I hope that you could pass that on to all of your colleagues as well. These are different times for us, and I know how hard you're working and appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you for taking time for me. I very much appreciate all of the work you're doing at schools, and as trustees, it's a big job. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Drowson.
Okay.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay. Trustee Brzovic, you had a second motion you'd like to present this evening?
I do. And I posted in the chat to make it easier for everyone, but I'll also read it, that the Board of Education of School District 68 requests that staff develop, implement, and build upon education and awareness initiatives around appropriate and safe mask wearing.
Is there a second to the motion? So the motion has been moved by Trustee Brzovic. It's been seconded by Trustee Barron. Trustee Brzovic, did you want to open debate?
Yes, please. This motion, I think, will in part help with something that Trustee Keller brought up, which is that there are parents who would like their kids to wear masks, even though it's not required, and it will help us to ensure that they do that safely and appropriately, and it will give a sense that while we may not be requiring it, that we aren't opposed to parents making those choices and can work in partnership, a bit of partnership to support them in making those decisions for their children. That's certainly something I've heard, is that it's easier for a parent to say to their child, I want you to do this, and even if the school doesn't say you have to, they're supporting me in my role as your mom or dad or caregiver to say that I want you to do this. And it's just continuing to reinforce public health and trying to work in partnership with public health, because our students, even if we aren't requiring, even if and where we're not requiring them to wear them in schools, they're wearing them out in public. So anything we can, they have to wear them in other venues. When they're at their when they're playing sports, when they're doing other activities. So anything that we can do to help support teaching proper health and safety is, I think, something useful. Thank you.
I was muted there. Sorry about that. So Trustee Wilkinson is our first speaker.
Thank you. I won't take long. It's a lot of the same information. I'm opposed to the motion, this motion as well. I feel like it feels disrespectful to me, because I feel like you know, our staff and our teachers are already, you know, it's their job to educate and bring awareness, and so you know, to require that they do something that I'm sure they're already doing, I don't think it's necessary, and I want to be in support of not piling one more thing onto their plate. They're already overflowing. So I'm opposed to the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee O'Neill is the next speaker.
Thank you. And, you know, again, I'm going to oppose this motion, and I think a number of reasons. Again, at this juncture in time, it seems a bit reactionary, to be quite honest, given that we've just had a recent announcement around public health guidelines and changes within the system already. A lot of adapting, a lot of educating, a lot of information out there. And part of me sees this as a role that the provincial health plays. But above and beyond that, I am grappling with how effective we could actually be in, the creation of, the rollout, approval of any such implementation plan. And given the level of time commitment for our staff, but the amount of time that students are actually going to still be in school for the term, right? This may be something that I would have entertained if we were looking at, the start of a new year in different circumstances. But I just feel it's a bit reactionary. And I would also hate to see us focus on something new like this and lose the focus on the work that we're doing that is, numbers are showing is working in our district for us, right? Because when you have only so many resources at your fingertips to grapple with these large issues and changes and rollouts of new programs and information, you generally end up dropping something else. So from my perspective, again, I think we're not at that place right now. And I think that we should focus on the work that we're doing that is being done in the district already that appears to be working.
Thank you. Trustee Barron?
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to speak in support of this motion, and thank you to Trustee Burzovich for bringing this forward. A couple of things I wanted to say. Should I continue, Chair? Oh, okay, she's back. Apologies. I wanted to make sure we still had a chair. So a couple of things that I wanted to mention, the particulars of this motion. And so the idea of this motion is to ensure appropriate and safe mask wearing in our district and to show that us as a board support the work that's already being done to continue around safe and appropriate mask wearing, and where needed to develop and implement methods for education and awareness around safe and appropriate mask wearing. And so it is building upon the great work that is already being done. Absolutely recognition that is happening. I do think that, like any safety issue, earthquake drills, I'm just, throwing some things out there. We have ample examples where we are consistently improving our methods and reinforcing how to most safely move forward in whatever incident is occurring. We're currently in a pandemic, and I think that this is a really easy way for us to reinforce one line of safety that we can take through a pandemic, which is mask wearing. It is not the end all be all, but it absolutely is one piece that is very important. When speaking to individuals within schools and within the community, this is the ongoing discussion. The number one thing that I hear is around education, around safe mask wearing as the biggest issue that is ongoing. And this motion is an attempt to identify this as an issue, which inevitably is going to occur, and to show our support for staff to continue the great work that they're doing and to continue evolving our methods for educating our students around appropriate and safe mask wearing. I don't think that this is going to increase workload. As we've said, it's already being done. However, I do think we need to look at how we're doing it and moving forward with that. I mean, would we say that we don't have the staff capacity? Sorry to throw out just another random example. Apparently fire drills are on my mind right now, but would we ask staff to not check fire extinguishers, for example, because we don't have capacity for staff to do it. It's the same thing in my mind, that we need to make sure that we have the capacity to continue our education and awareness initiatives around mask wearing. And if we don't have the capacity, then we need to find some capacity, because this is, in my opinion, as an individual trustee, essential to our students. And so it's, you know, there is no disrespect in this motion. It's to show support for staff, and to show support for our parents, and show support for our students as we move through this pandemic, to ensure that mask wearing is being done properly to ensure safety. So I'm in support of this motion. I do feel that it is a really appropriate and necessary step for us to take as a board to show our support around this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Trustee Keller is our next speaker.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd just like to share some thoughts. I'll start off by saying I think we do a great job through our communications department around some of the communications that we are already doing, and I'm going to try and lead to a question to our communications or other staff to share some of the work that we're already doing. But I suppose what I'd like to say is in our COVID safety plan, we have mask requirements. And I think for me, this motion helps to support implementation of our plan and monitoring of our plan to make sure that, you know, we're doing the best that we can to make sure that when masks are required by the provincial health officer as identified in our plan, that it's being done and that the masks are being worn appropriately. And so I really, you know, from my point of view, don't see any reason why not to support this. It's about assisting with implementation of our safety plan and assisting staff in doing that work. And which leads me to my question, if I may, Chair. I'm hoping that staff could share with the board some of the good work that they're currently doing. I know I've seen some of the posters and whatnot in my various visits, but I know that we've done a lot of good infographics and whatnot, and I'm just curious to know specifically what we're doing in relation to proper mask wearing etiquette, if that's the right word or procedure.
Superintendent Saywell, I will go to you first, and you can determine if you'd like to send it elsewhere.
Okay, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks, Trustee Keller. We do have posters in classrooms. I, a couple minutes ago, just asked our Director of Communications to find a couple of those, and through Will Dirkson's office, Manager of Health and Occupational Health and Safety, we have lots of posters throughout the schools. Here's my challenge with this, that teachers are doing great work around appropriate mask wearing in schools, and the motion kind of presumes maybe that they're not. And I appreciate, by the way, a sincere appreciation for all the discussion tonight, respectful debate, sincerely appreciated. But I want to sort of ask trustees to be careful that presuming teachers aren't teaching appropriate mask wearing, because they are. And that's been, I know that because we've asked principals to ensure that's happening in schools. And I'll pause. There might be, is this you, Dale, sharing some of the posters I see? Yeah,
I have
do you
some
have
examples
a few?
if you'd like. Sure.
Can you show a few?
Go ahead, Dale.
Thank you. Through the chair, these are some examples that were created by the Ministry of Education and in conjunction with BC CDC. So if I may, I'm just going to scroll through some of the ones that you'll see in the schools. So for example, this is of course, not sharing your things. That's a big one. We don't want people to be sharing their food and keeping their pencils and utensils to themselves. Always sanitizing your hands. So there's a bottle of hand sanitizer. This one's a big one, of course. We want to make sure that people, if they are having symptoms or exhibiting symptoms, we'd like for them to stay home. Things to do to stay safe. So again, these are some of the posters all in one that you've already seen. And wash your hands, of course, is another one. And I believe the last one is wearing your mask. And so these, again, like I said, we had printed a number of these, or rather all of these posters in multiples, and we had sent those to the schools early on this school year. We wanted to make sure that those were posted throughout the schools. There are some other posters, I just can't find them right now, trying to find those, but these are the big ones, and these are the ones that we recently, or rather early on, put them up. And there were some more recent ones that included translations. We as a district put those ones out to our schools through the Learning Services Department. I don't have those handy right now, but again, those are again in different languages to especially catch those the newcomers to Canada.
Great, thanks, Dale. And just to clarify, there's more than this. This was just what we could get on short notice. So, Trustee Keller, you had a follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And wow, that was quick to find those on the fly. That's really impressive. I'm glad to see that we have some materials related to wearing a mask. I'm just curious to know if we have any materials that are a little bit more detailed around how to properly fit and use a mask, how to wash it, how to remove it, how to put it on correctly, all the guidelines, I guess you might call them, for proper mask use. And I think really that's what the spirit and intent of the motion is about.
Superintendent Saywell?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I do appreciate that, Trustee Keller. And we do have a poster. I was trying to search it quickly. We do have a poster that shares some information on how to put on a mask and how to wear it properly. If I can get to it by the end of this, before the end of this meeting, I will share it. My apologies that I don't have it handy. Oh, there it is. Thank you.
If I may, Chair, I did find it.
Very quick.
Great. Thank you, Dale.
Through the chair, then I'll share this on the screen right now. You'll see a lot of tabs open here, so just I'll focus on this one right now. I will try and zoom in, just find my screen here. But this is, of course, through the Ministry of Education and the BC CDC. This is shared on the BC CDC website. And I'm going to go back and see if I can just zoom in a little bit more for you, if that helps everyone. How does that look? Better? Mm-hmm. Okay, and so this is an example that you'll see near sinks, for example, and you'll see that there's the hand washing and of course the proper way to wear a mask. And I'll just keep scrolling down. But I'll make sure, I'll check with my team tomorrow to see if we've got these printed for the schools. I believe we do. I believe through Will Dirksen and the Safety and Wellness Department, they had shared this with schools as well, and I can confirm that. But I do know, and I have seen this up on our walls in the District Administration Center.
Great, thank you very much, Dale.
No problem.
Once again, impressed with how quickly you're able to respond on the spot.
No problem,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So our next speaker on the list is Trustee Higginson.
Thanks. That was great information. So based on what I just saw, I will speak against the motion because I think it's redundant. I think the work is already happening. It's also part of the guidelines already on page 8. There's a whole thing about creating a positive school environment. And I also, I don't think we should have a motion that focuses on one of the measures that's in place. I think we should have a motion, if there was going to be one, that talks about all aspects of the hierarchies of control, not just the one that's at the very bottom that's the least effective. I don't think we need this motion. We don't need to pass a motion for something that appears to already be happening and is only about one particular part of the guidelines. Like I said, I think what we should be focusing on is consistent implementation of the current guidelines till we're told that we need to change them. They're working. 17,000 people every single day, less than 5 in-school transmissions. So I think that our staff is doing a tremendous job at implementing the guidelines consistently. And I do actually know that that document's been seen because my son, it's in at least one high school because my son commented on it to me one day about how he didn't think I was wearing masks properly because I wasn't following the rules on the poster he saw at school. So I don't think we need to have this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee O'Neill, you had a point of clarification. My apologies for missing that.
Well, and that's okay. It was going back to Trustee Keller's point, and I think that the superintendent may have addressed that, but I want to be, I want to understand, if we're coming from, a diversity of places, what the Trustee Keller's point was in relation to seeing this as the ability to, and my words, not his, but how I sort of heard it is, not directing staff, but ensuring that things are happening. But again, I think that Superintendent Say will address that, and perhaps Trustee Keller could repeat that portion of his statement for my clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Keller, are you able to speak to that?
I could, if I may, through the chair, request that Trustee O'Neill please help me remember the specifics that she's looking for.
Trustee O'Neill? Thank
you, Chair. Permission to speak directly to Trustee Keller. Trustee Keller, it's been a while since you spoke and there's been a couple of responses, but what I think I heard was that you saw this motion as a way to, and I know words are so important, and so I hate to use this word, but enforce, if you will, a policy or a practice. Is that jogging your memory a bit?
Through the chair. Yes. So I believe what I had said was I saw this as a mechanism, and this might not be exactly quoting my words, but as a way or mechanism to implement our COVID safety plan and perhaps enhance it. Yeah. And I have a question related to that, Chair, if I could ask at some point. I've added it to the chat when it's my turn.
Okay, I'll add that into the list.
Thank you.
So I've heard a lot of different perspectives, and I appreciate that we all, I think that's the beauty of being on a board of 9. We all bring a variety of positions on a variety of issues to the proverbial table. One of the things that concerns me, and that I think perhaps as a board we need to be talking about it with a little more clarity to the public, is with regard to the differences between wearing a mask in public and in public settings versus wearing a mask at school. Schools are controlled environments that are not open to the public. And so because of that controlled environment, it's not the same as going to the mall with your kids on a Saturday afternoon because you need to buy new shoes. And I think that that's a differentiation that needs to be made. We're very careful about who comes into schools. We have health checklists that students must, that parents need to check in for their students on a daily basis. Our staff are required to log into the app every day, check their symptoms before they come through the doors. We can't say that about public buildings. They don't have those mechanisms in place to ensure who's coming into the building is and has taken every step forward to be in a healthy place before they go out to a mall, for instance. And so I guess I just think it's really important that we make that differentiation for me, because I heard that, in a component of the debate. And in my opinion, schools being closed campuses, as it were right now, with no visitors unless authorized, and when authorized, are subject to our very strict protocols and guidelines of who can come in and those checklists that need to be followed through with. I don't see that as justification for passing this motion. And so along with what I've just seen demonstrated by the Director of Communications and the advice that we've heard from Superintendent Saywell, I'm speaking in opposition to the motion. I won't be supporting this motion this evening. Trustee Keller, you would like to pose a question?
Thank you. Through the chair. Relating to the motion, since we're debating education and awareness initiatives relating to appropriate and safe mask wearing, and that mask wearing is an integral part, one of the layers, as Trustee Higginson may have mentioned, maybe the last layer, but it's still in there. I'm curious to know through the chair to staff, because this affects how I might vote on the motion, how we are monitoring the effectiveness of our plan as it relates to mask use.
Superintendent Saywell?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair, the question is how we are monitoring our plan's effectiveness as it relates to mask use.
Correct.
Yeah, it's hard to, I would suggest it's hard to single out one element in the hierarchy of interventions. All of them work together in a way that does the best job to prevent transmission of COVID in schools. We see exposures in schools because, as Dr. Allison has said to me many times, as our provincial health officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, has said many times, if it's in the community, students and staff are going to bring it into schools, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's been transmitted. We've only had 3 transmissions in schools this year. So I think the combined effectiveness of the entire hierarchy of interventions is doing very well here. Thanks for the question, Trustee Keller.
Trustee Keller, do you have a follow-up question?
If I may, just quickly to Superintendent Saywell, do we have a sense of, I don't know if this is the right word, but I'll use it anyway, compliance when it comes to, in our schools, when it comes to mask wearing, where mask wearing is required?
Do I have a sense of how students and staff are complying to the mask wearing guidelines?
Yes.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, everyone's following the guidelines.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on, I will invite Trustee Burzovich to close debate.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know what I have to add here. Just basically, because I admit that I was not aware of the level of work that was already being done in terms of the poster campaign. I do think that anything that can continue to reinforce what we already know is valuable. And again, I appreciate the respectful debate. I think it was important for us to have this conversation and to get this information out to the public. And I respect the decision, the will of the board, whatever the decision is.
Thank you. Okay, so I will call the question. If you're opposed to the motion, please state that in the chat for the record. Okay. So the motion is defeated with trustees Wilkinson, Higginson, Robinson, McKay, and O'Neill opposed. Okay. That concludes business under 15.2. And so now we'll be moving on in our agenda. We have no presentations this evening, moving into correspondence 11.1. So let's see, 11.1. That the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the correspondence from Deputy Minister Scott MacDonald to be received and filed. Is there a mover? Moved by Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee Barron. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. 11.2. Route 16 bus concerns. That the Board of Education of School District that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the correspondence regarding Route 16 bus concerns to the Board Chair for response. And I'll just acknowledge that the letters have come from the following, and I will respectfully just use last names. Butler, Ekman, Harper, Kerr, Monahan, Quist. I may have said that wrong, my apologies. Reimer, Ringma, Sage, Taiwana, Toms, Watts, Williams, Kreutzer, Atkinson, and Collins. It's been moved by Trustee Berzovich. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Is there any opposition to the motion? Seeing none, the motion carries unanimously. 11.3, stricter COVID protocols. That the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the correspondence from Jay Fraser to the Board Chair for response. Is there a mover? Moved by Trustee O'Neill. Is there a second? Trustee Berzovich. I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. Committee reports. Business Committee 12.1. Trustee Keller.
Thank you, Chair. Just flip over here. So we have a motion in relation to transportation route review of Route 16. And if I may just read the motion, it reads as follows: that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, include bus route number 16 as a regular route in its transportation busing plan, and that this route will remain a regular route until such time as the annual transportation review identifies a ridership below 50% of bus capacity.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Trustee Keller, did you want to speak to the motion?
Maybe briefly, Chair. It was brought forward as part of our annual bus route transportation review as a staff recommendation. Trust Chair McKay had brought forward a motion and we received a number of letters that we just referred to accept a moment ago. And the idea with the motion is in recognition, I believe, of a higher ridership, that the board not bring this route forward on an annual basis for review unless ridership falls below 50% of bus capacity.
Thank you, Trustee Keller. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion on the motion, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Trustee Keller. So moving on to 12.2, Education Committee, Trustee Barron.
Thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get my camera on and there it is. Thank you. Through the Chair, yes, the Education Committee has one motion coming forward this evening. The motion reads that the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, approve the attached two-year draft local school calendar for 2021-22 and 2022-23.
Okay, I see that's been seconded by Trustee Berzovich. Did you want to speak to it?
Sure, just a couple of points. So this motion was passed to be brought forward this evening by the Education Committee on February 3rd. Prior to this motion being passed, feedback was received from the community and focused on the areas of timing of professional development days with stat holidays, December and spring break timing, length of spring break, and the use of quarter semester systems. The Education Committee considered the community feedback along with information provided through the NLPS Calendar Committee and voted in favor of the recommendation being brought forward this evening. That's all I have to say.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, I will call the question. Is there, if anyone is opposed, please identify that in the chat. So the motion carries with Trustee Higginson opposed. Thank you, Trustee Barron. Okay. So I'm going to call a 5-minute recess before we move into our senior staff reports. So we'll reconvene at 7:45. So I could ask everyone just to flip their camera on when they come back so that I know you're here. Great, thank you everyone. All right, just wanted to confirm our quorum before I call this back to order. So I'll call us back to order at 7:45. And it is my pleasure to move on into senior staff reports and introduce Director of Instruction of Indigenous Learning, Ted Cadwallader, whom I have, after many years of knowing him, now can pronounce his name properly. Welcome. I'm looking forward to hearing about Hul'qumi'num language.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody. I know that Karen has the PowerPoint that's in your package lined up. So Karen, if you could pop up the first slide, please. Siamna solwen, siamna siya ina shkwala kwa. Ikonas ilam nama tanasne. It would be negligent of me if I didn't start off a Hul'qumi'num presentation with out Hul'qumi'num to begin with. That was a respected elders, friends, and relatives. It was good to see you this evening. I'm pleased to be able to present some of what we are doing to revitalize and maintain Hul'qumi'num language on this territory where it was born. I'm going to start off this evening with some background on what's led us to this point, and some of you will be very familiar with that. Then I'll move to how we've embedded this work into our district planning through board goals and our strategies. And I'll provide some examples of the progress we've made, and then I'll finish with some future intentions. Next slide, please, Karen. Thanks. Senator Murray Sinclair, when he was the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, in the calls to action stated that, quote, "We've shown you the mountain. All we're asking is that you take the first steps." The CAHS policy framework tells us that land, language, and culture are the source of our health, and that all of those, if we look after them, lead to knowledge. And so, guided by those calls to action, guided by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, on federal and provincial legislation to enact the UN Declaration, the board goals of Truth and Reconciliation, the CAHS policy framework, and the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools operational plan, we have definitely taken the first steps to be part of revitalization and maintenance efforts of Hul'qumi'num language on this territory. I'll also say that we're not alone. Our colleagues to the south of us in Cowichan territory and in the Cowichan Valley School District, our colleagues to the north in School District 69 Qualicum are also taking action on this, as are all of the First Nations on these territories, because language, land, and culture cannot be separated from the identity of Indigenous peoples. So it's nice for us to be able to have this opportunity to join with our relatives in school districts and in First Nations communities on the work to revitalize this beautiful language. Next slide, please, Karen. Our operational plan states, quote, that we want to promote land and Hul'qumi'num language-based learning programs through resources and support, and through moving towards fluency at each and every step. We say in our district, small steps often, and I'm pleased to say that we are taking small steps as often as we possibly can under this objective and under these two strategies. And so during this year and in the last 2 years that we've made on these two fronts, I'm pleased to present some of these with you. Next slide, please. So I smile at this one too, because when I first came and I sat beside Uncle Jerry and Auntie Mandy, two of our senior language teachers in this district, and I met them many, many years ago before I came to work in the school district. They said to me, Ted, we're getting a little older. We're not ready to finish yet, but we can feel that we're a little bit tired. It would be good if we had some company here. So I'm pleased to say that we were able to identify and recruit over the last 2 years 3 new Hul'qumi'num teachers, and we now have 7 teachers working in our school district certified with First Nations language teaching certificates, one with a Bachelor of Education and a teaching certificate, and as well as a First Nations language teaching certificate to his credit. And they are spread out across 26 schools. So still thin on the ground, still fragile, because there's so few Hul'qumi'num certified language teachers, and we have such a great need across our district. I'll also be remiss if I didn't say these language teachers are not just teaching in our schools. They're teaching in post-secondary programs, they're teaching in community programs, they're teaching grandchildren, nieces, nephews, aunts, uncles. So they are at the forefront of these language efforts, not just in our schools, but in those communities as well. We've also provided dedicated funding out of our targeted Aboriginal education budget each year. So we have a line item there. It's for resource development and training. The board has provided a commitment of funding, and through that this year we've purchased technology for our teachers to use in their classrooms. And so microphones, speakers, so that when they're wearing their mask, they can have a speaker underneath it and be heard by the students clearly when they're teaching. We've purchased microphones, video cameras, and most recently a go bag, so that when the opportunity presents itself, they can grab and run if they have a fluent language speaker that can work with them, as happened last Monday. We've provided ongoing training for those language teachers. For the rest of this year, we have 6 full Mondays where they get to work with a fluent speaker. That started last Monday, and so 5 more times before the end of the year. That was a request that they made to both to Nanaimo Nation, to Auntie Joan, and to myself, and I'm pleased to say that we were able to deliver on that. We managed to hire an amazing learning coordinator at the beginning of last year, Tanis Calder, who joined us from School District 52, Prince Rupert. Her incredible skill set of working with our language teachers has helped the district set up a publishing entity to start with called NLPS Learns. And through that publishing company, we've published one of the gifts that we provided to you tonight. Some of you are able to pick it up, the book Shkwalachwa, about families. And so there's a number of publishing pieces that are on the roll, and I'll feature some of them in our next slide. And lastly, because we are an ally in this effort with Hul'qumi'num speaking nations, Hul'qumi'num nations, we work closely with Nanaimo Nation. Every Thursday morning at the crack of dawn, the CAO, Auntie Joan Brown, and I meet. We invite people to join us to talk about what's going on in their language world. So we've reached out to Squamish Nation, to academics, to people who are working in language in their own communities and in other sectors to help us make sure that we are on a good path to building Hul'qumi'num opportunities on this territory. Next slide, please, Karen. This year, because of Tanis's skill set internally, we've focused on creating digital resources for our teachers to use in class and for students to interact with. We learned last year during remote learning because of COVID that our language teachers' resources were based in hard copy for the most part. And so that's why this effort to build these digital resources. These include beginning readers and a coloring book with QR codes embedded at the end of them, so you can hear the book being read to you in Hul'qumi'num. Shkwalachwa and Tesquail are the 2 examples. So up in the left-hand corner, you can see Speath, Shkwalachwa. Bear has a family, and that was a gift to our trustees this evening. On the left-hand side is Tesquail. What's the day like? Again, those have QR codes embedded in the back, and so you can hear Hul'qumi'num speakers. I'm gonna put quote marks around that because I'm the one who reads Squalachua, and George Seymour reads Stesh Atasquale. So more to come. We designed a coloring book out of Stesh Atasquale. George Seymour, when he joined us, has provided, you can see When Seagull Stole the Sun, 2 videos of him telling stories that are of this territory. And there's spin-off academic activities with each one of those 2 stories. You can see a matching game with numbers down below where you can drag and drop those on top of the numbers to see if you're right. Squalesh, the birds, are all in Hulkaminam, and you can click on those and hear the names of those birds. And so Tanis has been designing all of these interactive games and resources that are now housed on NLPS Learns. If anybody would like to go there, you can have a look because they're public at the moment. And each of these has been done by our language teachers, providing the Hulkaminam and the ideas to Tanis, and Tanis has turned them around in such a beautiful way. I'm very pleased with the results of what we've done digitally this year. Next one, please, Karen. Our language teachers are a treasure. They are, I'm not sure what the word is in Hulkaminam, but in Kwakwala it is glukwe, it is hasenakat, it's treasure, the breath of our ancestors. We are truly blessed with these individuals. They are deeply connected to their ancestors, and their ancestors' knowledge comes through them to the forefront in what they do. So it's not only Hulkaminam. These 7 teachers are a treasure for our district. They're an incredible group of people. They've committed themselves to learning and teaching Hulkaminam, and any time spent with them is medicine. If you're ever having a bad day, you can go and sit with them and just listen. You don't have to do anything else, but just to be with them. Their gentleness and their depth of knowledge, cultural knowledge, and language can't be overstated. Professional learning time we provide for them every Monday afternoon. As I mentioned, we recently arranged for a full day session 6 times over the next 4 months with Dolores Louis, a fluent speaker. We've been providing them with technology and support. We're providing training to them to use those things to create those quality resources. We're connecting those lessons to land. You can see 3 photographs there. The one that's on the bottom right is Kalit Bay, Taminas Bay. We got permission from Chief to go down to there when the community was closed, so that George could share a creation story on that beach with us in conjunction with Oceans Network Canada. We're working with Oceans Network Canada to design some Science 9 lessons that embed Hulkaminam in the teachings of Science 9. You can see that we have started a relationship with Wildwood Ecoforest. They're a partner with whom they have expressed interest in creating Hulkaminam learning spaces in that old growth forest. So we're creating a relationship with them. They hosted us with 2 Cowichan elders, Darlene and Arvid. So Darlene Sylvester and Arvid Charlie. Arvid's the one in the bright orange there, and Arvid has an encyclopedic knowledge of Hulkaminam plants, and he came there and shared his knowledge with our Hulkaminam language teachers. It was an incredible day. Last slide just talks briefly about some of the small steps we're taking forward. So when Auntie Joan and I talk, we talk about carrying on the dreams of the Nanaimo ancestors and building a pathway from preschool through post-secondary, a career pathway that Hulkaminam is an integral part of. So our relative Hulkaminam, it's still in a fragile state. So we're making these efforts to strengthen it. We're looking to create an environment where a student can see a path from preschool and into their adulthood. We're hoping that they can build careers that include Hulkaminam language, whether it's a teacher, scientist, mechanic, carpenter, artist, trustee, or in fact, all of the above, as I know some of our trustees have more to their lives than board meetings in the evenings. And so to do this, we're dreaming big. We're dreaming of how to create a center of excellence where language is a priority, where people can interact and where people can learn. So we've taken some of those first steps towards realizing that dream by creating these resources and supporting our teachers that I just shared with you. Recently, we've assigned one of our teachers, George Seymour, to the Quam Early Learning Center to start our preschool children off on their path and to start Quam Stawikos off on that path of a Hulkaminam immersion environment. Another is underway between Simon Fraser University and Nanaimo to host this Center of Excellence at Woodbank School and to offer a certificate diploma program in Hulkaminam linguistics. Simon Fraser has done this in the past through operations out of Cowichan Valley, and recently Nanaimo, in working with SFU, received a grant. We put out that invitation to people to express an interest in being part of that diploma program starting in May. We've had, I believe, over 40 people express an interest in being part of that. And so I'll say again, small steps often to be a part of this language revitalization efforts across Hulkaminam speaking territory. Hi,
Chika. Ayan, CICE. Thank you, good work. I am so impressed. I'm not even sure that's the right word. I think the right word would be profoundly grateful. Perhaps that would be more fitting. To see how far this work has come in the past couple of years from being identified as important. Really, you know, language was identified as important through understanding Siyaitsis. And then from there, what did that mean? Where did that come from? We take it to the land. The land is our teacher. To see how it's just been so embraced and being moved forward in a way that is so thoughtful and considerate and in partnership with those that that it's so deeply important to when we talk about the ancestors. As I learn the language, I feel my ancestors coming to help me without those teachings, and that's a really big important part of this work. So I'm just want to express my gratitude to you, Ted, and for the work that the entire department does. To the teachers, that every time I meet a new Hulkaminam teacher, they share another little lesson. I'm slowly getting my sound back in the back of my throat. That's been lost to me for a very long time. And so I have to start by saying thank you with deep gratitude. And then I will, I'll start a question. I'll start us off with a question, and then I'll see if my fellow colleagues have questions for you as well. I recognize that we have done some work in the last, over the past year, looking at the stories that shape us and thinking about what steps can we take to really walk that path in a good way of reconciliation. And language was a really big part of that discussion. And so first acknowledging that we're taking those small steps every day and they're adding up to be quite significant. But my question would be, just in recognition that there's a difference in dialect amongst our three nations that we serve, and on whose territory we work, how do we differentiate between Nanaimo, Hulkaminam, say to that of neighboring nations?
I was going to say through you, Chair, but it's to the Chair. Thank you. That is a good question, and it's often a question that takes the work around language revitalization, maintenance, and learning off, and it's a distraction that sometimes. When I've had the opportunity to spend time with fluent speakers, they don't see it as an issue. It's when we get into the written part of Nanaimo, Tsamenis, Gawatin, those when we start to try to write it down, because it wasn't written down before, of course. When we start to write it down, conversations around how you say that and how you write that start to rise to the surface. So one of the benefits that we've had is hiring George Seymour most recently, because George is able to say, in Seminis, we say it like this, in Nanaimo, we say it like this. But all of us who know how to say it know that there's a difference there. And so they bring that to their own teaching when they're teaching their students. There's been a lot of work done in Cowichan tribes around language revitalization and working with post-secondary and working with organizations like First Voices to archive the way things are doing. So those issues are still alive and they still come to the forefront, but we address them just by being open to say our relatives say it like this, we say it like this.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions for Ted? Oh, there's one. Didn't see. I'm just so excited to hear this update. My apologies. Trustee Higginson.
Thank you, Heitke, a million times over. Ted, this is incredible work, and I'm so grateful for your leadership and to to everyone who's doing this. My son comes home sometimes with his Hulkaminum book, and it's very obvious to me that his teacher has taken the time themselves to write out the resources and create them. And I always felt that was such a great inequity. Very grateful that the teacher was doing that, but also felt like it was such a great inequity. And, my lessons working with those wonderful elders that you're talking about the importance of the language, and that every time we speak the language, it takes some of the pressure off of the shoulders of the old people. To me, it's so clear that this is what we need to do, and it's very creative thinking that I'm sure actually it's thinking from the old ways. But I appreciate your leadership in this. It's so important that I'm a little speechless, and I'm really emotional about it, because I know how important it is to our family that we're doing this. So thank you for taking the vision and navigating this very colonial education system to create these beautiful resources and help language and culture of the land that our school district sits on thrive. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if there are no more questions, I would just like to say that it is with great love and respect that I take this work to my heart. I believe that Indigenous languages across this province have been done a horrific disservice through education, and any efforts that we can make as an education system to play a role in this revitalization may have the opportunity to save us all. Some of the things that I learned from language change the way that I see the world, and there are these great treasures hidden within the language that I come upon every single day. I'd also like to raise my hands to our superintendent, who does a beautiful job of showing the importance of Hulkaminum to this district as an organization. When he speaks Hulkaminum to schools and to classes, as he did at Quam when we drummed George and Adam in to introduce George to the school, makes my heart grow 2 sizes larger each time he does that. So Nihai, thanks for the opportunity to present tonight on the work that we're doing.
Thank you. So before I go over to Superintendent Saywell, I guess in closing, I think you touched on something that's really important to me, when we think about why language is important. And I think that it's not just about making a difference so much as I think school boards have the responsibility and obligation to take those steps as a part of rectifying the destruction that education once was to Indigenous peoples. And so any little step that we can take as a board to support that work, I think is our responsibility to do so. And I look forward to continuing that work with you. Superintendent Saywell.
Thank you, through you, Chair. To Director of Instruction, Cadwallader, thank you, Ted, for your presentation this evening. You know, this work is near and dear to my heart. You know, school systems haven't been kind to our Indigenous brothers and sisters. In fact, they've been a tool of destruction and cultural genocide, and you know, designed to kill the Indian in the child, of course. And so history and culture and language have all been lost. And so the work you're doing is reclaiming that history and culture and language, Ted, and it's greatly appreciated. And you've brought a different perspective to this school district and have taught us to walk a little bit differently on this land. And we're learning to do so a little bit more each day. So Haichka to you.
Thank you, Ted. We'll let you have the rest of the evening off now.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, so moving into our next section on the agenda, 13.2, Secretary Treasurer Mark Walsh and Executive Director of Communications Dale Burgos. I will pass it over to Dale.
Hi, good Chair. Hi, Squale. Hello, everyone. Good evening. It's hard to transition from what we just talked about into budget, as riveting as budgets may be for some people and those who love numbers. I love numbers, so budget's very exciting for me. I'm going to be speaking on engagement, but if I may, and if I could, Chair, I just wanted to add to all the good feelings that we've been having this evening, especially after Mr. Cadwallader had spoken. This is the third school board that I've worked for now, and this is the first time with the district. Oh, did you lose me? There you go. I think I'm back. Yeah, I did. I don't know how far I got, but I'll say that this is the third school board that I've worked for now. And in the last 6 years that I've worked for Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, never have I experienced the love, the caring, the way that we respect the land and the traditions that we are on, and just being embraced by the people that we are partnered with in the community. And so I do treasure that. And by the way, one more thing, I did one of those 23andMe Ancestry DNA kits, and a very small percentage, I just found out I'm Native American, and that's how it shows up. So I'm not sure what that is. I have to dig a little bit deeper, but there's a small percentage in there. And so this is a very exciting thing for me. So I wanted to share that. Thank you for letting me share that, Chair.
Thank you.
Although I had the mic and I have control of the screen, so I guess you had no choice. I'm going to ask if Ms. Matthews has the document handy by any chance. And we can put that up on the screen, and maybe while she's looking for that, actually I see it coming up right now. I'm going to click on that, pass that over so everyone at home can see that. Give me 1 second. Okay, should be on your screen now. This is the information sheet for the budget portion, or rather the community engagement budget portion of our 2021-22 budget. And I wanted to just share some of the highlights from what we experienced through this engagement. And we'll go through it very quickly. I won't go into too many details, and perhaps Secretary Treasurer Walsh can finish it off. I did want to share that starting on February 22nd, we opened up this community engagement and we used thought exchange. That seems to be the way that we're going right now. It also seems to be that the way that we're getting the most feedback as well, and really good feedback from the community. And so I want to thank those that participated. I'll get to the numbers in just a second. We opened that up and we left it open for 2 weeks. It officially was completed on March the 5th. The link, or rather the exchange, was shared with district staff, students, their families, stakeholders, and of course our Indigenous partners. When you first open up that thought exchange, one of the first questions that you see is a survey or qualifier question, because we want to know who these people are that are doing the survey. And of course, you can do this anonymously, but this is a great way for us to be able to break down the thoughts and the exchanges a little bit later on. So for example, the qualifier questions, this one shows whether you're an employee of the district or a parent or guardian, a student, and so on and so forth. The other qualifier question, or the survey question, was in which region do you reside? And this will make more sense once I show you a little bit of what the thoughts were when we pulled all the data afterwards. Moving on to the second page, I believe you can still see that. I'm just looking at a different screen right now. In total, there were 231 participants, 275 thoughts, and just over 7,300 ratings. And maybe if I could just explain for those that are not familiar too much with Thought Exchange, it's an online platform where we, of course, share our thoughts, and that's essentially the basis of it. And so the question for the Thought Exchange for this one was, as we continue to plan the upcoming budget, what are some priorities we should consider? So it's purposely very high level, very open-ended, and we want to provide that opportunity for anyone with any of their thoughts to share that. And of course, like you can see, there were 275 thoughts, and then those participants rated just over 7,300. Good number, and show you exactly it's in just a minute. Here's an example, or rather, just again, very high level, who were the people that participated, and so we can see that it was 39% of the participants were employees of the district. The largest participant group were the parents or guardians of students in the district, and then we had 1% students of the district, so the 3, and then 1% equated to a member of a partner group, so Indigenous, city, town, council, business owner, for example. 2% was a member of the general community, and then 1% was other. In which region do we reside, or do you reside rather? 9% of those that participated were in Ladysmith, 90% in Nanaimo, and 1% in other. What I'll do now, although I don't know if Karen's ready to, I have it ready on my screen. So Karen, if you can stop sharing for just a moment, and then I'm going to share my screen. And one moment, 1 second here. Let's see if I can see that. Okay. Chair, you should be able to see the top thoughts, right? I think so. If your mic is on, yes, I can see it. Perfect. Okay. I'm not going to go through every thought. As you can see that there's 35 pages. I'm looking right now at the budget 2021-22, all thoughts. So all of the thoughts that were compiled throughout this engagement. As you can see, the top thoughts, and I'm just going to go through maybe the top 4 or 5 here. The top one that were most rated, so again, 4.3 was the highest rating, mental health supports directly for students. Okay, very, again, to the top level. The comment there, mental health supports have been underfunded and are more needed than ever with the pandemic. The second top thought, we need school counselors at every school. The third top thought, increasing support staff at the elementary level. The next one, more student support. And then at top 5, funding proper supports should be the #1 priority so that all students can equitably access an education. Okay. Go to the next one. These are the top thoughts for Nanaimo. You'll see some similarities between the all thoughts. And again, you'll see the mental health supports directly for students. You also see that we need school counselors at every school. Frontline school staff should be prioritized over administrative positions. Number 4, increasing support staff at the elementary level, and then more student support. That rounds out the top 5. 4 different, and as we know, Ladysmith is of course a different community. The town of Ladysmith, priorities may change between Nanaimo and Ladysmith, and so the top thoughts there: Ladysmith primary and intermediate. Ladysmith primary and intermediate have serious issues in terms of air quality, water quality, and seismic. Ladysmith facilities upgrade or new build. So the closed Davis Road School has resulted in overcrowding in Ladysmith schools. The next one, budget to help support families. Families in some communities struggle with buses, taxis, gas, getting students to school, food and clothing. A budget for child, youth and family support workers, and align infrastructure and physical assets to support high school quarter system for grade 10 to 12. Grade 7 to 9 should be in middle school and not quarter school, or not quarter system rather. Now, as you could see, the thoughts were very different. Let me just put myself back on the screen here. Again, through the chair. You'll see the thoughts were very different between Nanaimo and Ladysmith, and that's why we chose the regions or go by region. We wanted to see what Nanaimo's priorities were and then Ladysmith. And this, again, very clear, showing the priorities are very different between the two regions. And so hopefully this helps during the budget deliberation process. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer, did you want to add anything before we move to questions?
Yeah, sure. Just perhaps just a little bit more about the work that we're doing now. We're still having preliminary discussions with our partner groups, again, just to make sure that we understand what priorities are. Of course, the board will hear those priorities as well, but given the uniqueness of COVID, we're also trying to get a sense of what really is something that happened this year that we'd like to see continue, things like that, to get an understanding of that. In reality, we typically couch our consultation, and we don't have a lot of extra money to spend, but we do need to talk about priorities. The other thing just to mention too is that as part of the long range facilities plan consultation, we are hearing budget input, and so I think a number of trustees were at the student town hall, and we heard not just about facilities, but we also heard about the things they want in education, but also some of the financial operational decisions that they would like to see, and I think mental health is an example of that. And so just a little bit more context. Finally, just as a reminder, we're going to hear our base grants should be announced Friday. So the enrollment that we brought to the board that was put to the ministry, we should hear what our base grant is, which lets us start to build the budget. To be clear, because the provincial budget is delayed this year, it's a kind of preliminary number only, a preliminary of a preliminary number. So if the ministry was going to make any big changes, so for instance, the board's advocacy with respect to pay equity, we likely wouldn't see it, I think, on Friday. We would see some kind of outcome when the government themselves has had the chance to talk about that and go to the legislature with their budget. So all in all, really appreciate all the feedback that we're getting, and you'll definitely see it reflected in the budget or explanations of why it may not be reflected in the budget.
Great, thank you. So we have a question, Trustee Brzovic.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to Mr. Burgos. And forgive me, Mr. Burgos, if I missed it. How far back can you go if you wanted to in terms of comparing data in terms of number of participants this year versus the last say 3-5 years, and or to see differences in responses or similarities in responses over the past say 3-4 years?
Thank you, Trustee Burgos. Through the chair, and great question. If we use Thought Exchange, right? I have those all, of course. All the past exchanges are closed, of course, but we can still access those. And so, for example, this information sheet is very similar to what we used last year. I don't have those numbers in front of me, although I can probably find those right now and pull those up for you. But if we used a certain product like Thought Exchange, it's very easy to. So I can easily go into the system and see what the numbers were last year. I believe, for what I remember, the numbers are very similar in terms of participants. Past years, we've used SurveyMonkey, for example, and so of course with that we still have our account, so I can easily go in there and see the number of people that participated, the number of thoughts. I mean, all that information. If it was done electronically, I can easily find that. If it was done on paper years and years ago, it might be a little bit different of a story.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
No problem.
Thank you.
No follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Brzovic. Trustee Keller.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I just had a question probably for Mr. Walsh. I think that Thought Exchange is a great way to get feedback, especially at this time. And it's great that we have received so much participation. My question is, and Mr. Walsh has touched on this a little bit, but I'm just curious to know how we might see some of that feedback reflected or not reflected, as I think it was suggested, in the budget that is presented to the board.
Sure. So given the example, let's take the kind of demand for more community youth counselors, for instance. Then what we would likely be looking at is coming to the board to say, look, this is a serious priority that both our community and our staff have identified, and it's a board priority as well. And so again, we look at how are we going to reallocate. Is typically the way that it will work in a year that we have, enrollment that's likely stagnating. It's going up a little bit, but that would hopefully be covering our inflation. In a year where we're having a significant increase in enrollment, then what we may well do is say, oh, we've got extra funds, here you are. We come with budget savings ideas sometimes they don't work. So the bus example is one. But the other piece that we probably have in our back pocket this year, and we're coming onto those numbers now, is say there's this kind of specific targeted area, and the board is very, I think, committed to stability in the system, and so we don't typically come proposing massive changes in allocations one way or the other, but the board often does end the year with a surplus, and if it's sufficient, and we can keep enough held back for rainy days or COVID days, then we may be able to say, okay, in September, this priority of the board, we would come back with funding. The other thing I would say is often you will see the priorities that we're hearing about at the board level and the consultation start to appear in future years as well. So you can, when we talk about our facilities planning and we talk about commitment to environmental, etc., you're starting to see shifts in the way that we support and we fund, the way that the recommendations that we come forward with for the use of surplus or for AFG or for capital dollars, etc. So it's a bit of an immediate and a long term, but we'll certainly intend to provide the feedback on why. So be realistic, there's a demand for a big number of additional EAs. Well, without additional funding, it's unlikely that we're going to be able to meet that need. And then, of course, the board may say, staff, well, this is a priority. Can you come back with some suggestions? And the board is put in a position of, making determinations.
Do you have a follow-up, Trustee Kelly?
If I may, just quickly. So I believe it may have been Superintendent Saywell or perhaps Mr. Walsh who said something like, the board could have anything we want, but not everything, or something to that effect. And I'm wondering sort of how we might work in some of these trade-off discussions in the budget process. If we have to make choices between option A and option B, how that gets worked in a way that provides for meaningful debate.
Sure, and through Chair, what I would say is that we are very hesitant about bringing option A and option B because typically option A is cut this group to get this group. So, if it's something that we think is a priority, the board has prioritized X. And so therefore, here's how we are proposing to do that. But rather, the board can contemplate doing this or contemplate doing that. I think because it's often talking about specific jobs rather than discretionary funding, that's a little bit of a hiccup. But what you do see, and what I think what staff really appreciate is that, okay, give us a report on the efficacy of how this is going, and give us a report on the efficacy of how this is going. And then the board now has a sense of, okay, well, again, that coal mining program was great 50 years ago. We just don't need to fund the coal mining program anymore. And so now we've heard the report. We accept that the staff is probably correct that the coal mining program is out of date. So when we come to budget time and we're presenting you with cuts to the coal mining program to reallocate to mental health, the board's kind of anticipating what change is coming. So I guess we could be directed to say, well, you know, it's really important that you're going to fund mental health. Tell us what those investments would be, and then tell us how the choices we have to get them. But we are very careful because it's typically jobs on the line when we're doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other questions on this topic. So I will thank Mr. Burgos and Mr. Walsh for answering our questions and for the report for where we're at this evening. Thank you very much. All right, so we have no unfinished business this evening. We have one item under new business, 15.1. This one was passing it over to myself. So the board identified that they wished to see in the strategic plan a number of objectives, but that they wanted to establish a board environmental stewardship and sustainability committee. And so myself, Vice Chair Stanley and Superintendent Saywell have gotten together quite a few times in order to discuss membership of the committee so that we could get this committee off the ground and get it started. And so what we've done is on the action sheet that's on page 55 of the agenda is we've made a recommendation of who might participate in that committee to begin with, and at least do the work of writing terms of reference for approval by the board. And so I'll just briefly share what the recommendation is at this point. That there would be 2 students, partner group representation from one from each partner group, NLPS staff, that would include the energy manager, Department of Facilities, perhaps from another department, or any other relevant staff positions as determined. In discussion through a number of meetings, and then also in consultation with this employee, CISM was considered as likely an integral part of this committee in order to enact some of the CIS's framework around the environment and land, as it's a good connection to the board's goal. 2 trustees, one of whom will be appointed as co-chair of the committee, the superintendent or representative, and then the committee membership would be able to invite other committee members as needed. And I think one of the most notable conversations we had was with regards to Indigenous rights holders. And so we were trying to find the right way to frame this in writing a membership for approval by the board. And so what we've come to is the recognition that rights holders have a place in all of our conversations, but most especially in relation to land, and as that connects to environmental stewardship and sustainability. And so we didn't list them as an individual member of the committee, but rather we assume that the invitation will always be open. That invitation will be extended, and if they wish to join us, then they are most certainly welcome at all times. And so with that, there is a recommendation before the board, and I'll open it up for questions. And we'll start from there. So, Trustee Higginson.
Thank you. I really appreciate the work to, think about our rights holders and facilitating the participation of knowledge keepers. I do think they're 2 separate. My brain is just a bit tired, so I think they're 2 separate issues. I think that I would like to see personally the knowledge keepers included under the list of membership and allow them to participate as they see fit. I feel like it's really important that they're, that knowledge is so key, I believe, to the successful implementation of this in a way that brings to life all those things that we talked about earlier with our Director of Instruction, Ted Cadwallader, and the CIS's framework about the importance of the lessons from the land here. So personally, I think they should be listed in the why can't I talk? I apologize, everyone. It's late. But in the list, explicitly listed as members, with the allowing them to come and go, sort of as you've said in the next paragraph out, but I think their membership should be very explicit. Thanks. That was not eloquent at all. Apologies.
No problem. I think it was about as eloquent as my description of trying to share. I understand. And I don't disagree. I think that's good feedback. It's certainly feedback that we contemplated and weren't sure how to land on. So I appreciate that feedback on that topic. Trustee Barron?
Thank you, Chair. Now's my turn to try to speak eloquently. I just had some questions around the youth involvement, and before I say it, thank you for all your work, and for Vice Chair Stanley and for our superintendent. I'm really excited to see this getting moving in the right direction, and I know lots of great work will come from this committee, so very exciting to see it coming to fruition. But I was hoping that you could clarify a little bit around the intentions and conversations that have been had to date around the youth involvement, what that'll look like, some considerations around how youth can best participate.
Thank you. So it's interesting. We haven't really dug into the what and the how so far. We didn't want to predispose what they might do or what any member might be able to provide. So I don't know that I can totally answer that question beyond saying that we just know that it's important that they're there. Maybe with that being said, I would ask Superintendent Sewell to share perhaps what he might envision there as well.
Hi, sorry, can you repeat the question?
What might student participation look like at ESAC? In a minute. Would you like to
What might student participation look like?
Correct.
Well, I would envision that students are going to be an integral part of this committee work, and I would suggest that there's an opportunity for a variety of students to sit on this committee, and there might be an opportunity for rotating a couple students through. That was my sort of initial thinking in having students contribute.
Okay, thank you. So I know we're not completely articulating clear answers to you because it has yet to be determined, only identifying how important it is that they're there. Did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you, and I look forward to hearing the creative ways that youth will be participating moving forward.
Great, thank you. Trustee Keller?
Thank you, Chair McCain. Again, thank you and everyone else that was involved in putting this together. Just a quick question. I'm thinking along the lines of Trustee Barron's question a little bit, and thinking about some of the other student groups who are currently involved in sustainability initiatives throughout the district. I'm just wondering if we think that allowing 2 students, and I see that we can invite students on an as-needed basis, if that gives us enough flexibility to include some of our students who are already taking part in various sustainability initiatives, because it would be really helpful to find ways to include them.
Yes. So I think our intention is to get this started with 2 students, and I know that when staff go out and look to have students participate in these types of situations, that they're looking for those who may have an interest. So certainly, acknowledging the commitment that so many of our students have to the environment at their local schools, and then when they come together district-wide, there is a large group of students that do that work for us, and so I would trust that staff's going to sort of tap that knowledge base, if you will. To help bring them in. And I think if we start with 2 students, in order for the board to approve the membership this evening, with the suggestion that Trustee Higginson has as well with the knowledge keepers, that once that group comes together and writes the terms of reference, they very well might come back to us and say, and by the way, we'd also like to increase it to being, 5 students or something else. So 2 students would get us started, and then if they have a better recommendation for us and how we should look at that would come back once they begin drafting the terms of reference for the committee.
Thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense to me. So thanks for the clarification.
You're welcome. Trustee Brzovic?
Going to move the recommendation, and I'm just trying to find the wording, and I don't seem to have it in front of me.
I can read it for you if you like.
Yes, please.
Sure. That the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, approve the membership of the Environmental Stewardship and Sustainability Advisory Committee, and that the membership draft a terms of reference for the committee for approval by the board. And before you move the motion, is your intention to move the motion to include the change that was recommended by Trustee Higginson?
Yes.
Okay, just for the clarity of the group. Okay, so that's been moved by Trustee Brzovic, and I see it seconded by Trustee Barron. Did you want to speak to it, Trustee Brzovic?
Yes, I want to say thank you to the team for doing this work. I think that and I appreciate Trustee Higginson for her thoughts around our knowledge keepers. I think this is a really nice, well-rounded composition, and I think that it will be a really great group that will move our district forward in an area that is extremely important to our students and our staff and our families. So I'm very excited to see us moving forward in this.
Thank you. So I'll speak in favor of the recommendation and just acknowledge that Trustee Stanley had a great deal to do with the work that we've done this evening, and I just want to acknowledge the work that went into the membership that she participated in as well. So any other thoughts on the motion? Pardon me. Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. Is there anyone opposed? The motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. And so that moves us out of new business. For information, there's a board motions report, trustee committee reports. Ms. Matthews, are there any questions? No questions this evening, and so I will seek a motion to adjourn. Trustee Higginson motions, seconded by Trustee O'Neill. Any opposition? With no opposition, we're adjourned at 8:42. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.